some of the strangest things that you saw at weddings? Story 1. The bride arrived in a golf cart, alone, under an entrance of over-the-top pyrotechnics, followed by the groom in a revving Ferrari. This was all indoors in our city's International Convention Center, LOL. The venue itself is exorbitantly expensive. Super over-the-top wedding including a huge ribbon-dancing gymnastics troupe that did a routine down the aisle. Story 2. Bride makes her entrance into the reception as a newlywed for the first time. Asks where's the groom, who emerges from underneath her dress. Story 3. Bride and groom had an open relationship. Our friend group knew, but I'm guessing the bride's entire family, including her 90-year aunties, was not in the know. Groom thought it was a good idea to make out with side chick on the dance floor in the middle of the reception. Story 4. There was a live band. The very drunk bride took the mic and asked to sing. I walked into the room when she was drenched in sweat, absolutely belting out Me and Bobby McGee. Later, she was walking around the room handing out lottery scratch tickets to all the guests as the wedding favor. Story 5. It was a second reception after the real wedding in the bride's hometown a couple weeks earlier. The groom made a speech telling everyone how they still haven't had close relationship and they are still going to wait a while after marriage until God tells them it's the right time. Why are you telling us this? Why? Story 6. My family was raised in Christian Science, and while some of us, including me, have left, we're still weird people. Going to a wedding where half the attendees were Mormon and didn't drink while the other half was so drunk we couldn't see straight was trippy. Weirdest wedding I've ever been to. Story 7. Bride got angry at the staff for removing the labels off the wine glasses because they were crystal and weren't worth anything after that. They weren't Waterford. Story 8. Was standing with the groom at the end of a limbo dance line. A female guest was making her way under the very low limbo pole in a short skirt, forgetting she wasn't wearing underwear. We got the whole show, and when she finished, her friend whispers in her ear about her faux pas. She bolted from the venue not to be seen again that day. Story 9. Story 10. At one wedding, the couple decided to have a Star Wars-themed ceremony. Instead of traditional vows, they exchanged lightsabers and declared their love in the language of the Jedi. The wedding party dressed up as characters from the movies, and even the officiant wore a Jedi robe. It was a unique and unforgettable celebration that truly brought out the inner geek in everyone present. Story 11. The son of a friend was getting married. The groom was obese, was wearing some kind of big neon clown shoes, and had a pistol prominently displayed in his belt. The bride was perfectly normal and attractive, and I wondered what the hell she saw in the guy. Story 12. My extremely drunk great aunt making a pass at my boy uncle. She kept telling him he looked like her nephew. She was so wasted she didn't realize he was her nephew. Story 13. We had a courthouse wedding. It was announced 2 weeks beforehand. Was pregnant, he had good insurance. So understandable some wouldn't be able to plan for that, but not a single member of his family showed. His family is kind of large. The judge kept waiting for. Story 14. The groom's brother being overly touchy with the wife-to-be, who was probably enjoying all the attention since she was letting it happen. Cow made a few people uncomfortable. Story 15. I saw a groomsman at the head table eat a box of white cheddar cheese. It's for dinner. He brought his own and just disregarded the served meal. Story 16. A bride got too hot and passed out, kicking her shoes into the invitees. Some sort of seizure. Got her cooled off and into a chair, and then the groom passed out. What a mess. A hot day and a long Catholic mass wedding. Story 17. At my wedding reception, my husband was nowhere to be found. My brother-in-law said he was in the parking lot. He was in the back seat of my cousin's car having close relationship with her. Story 18. I once saw a wedding where the bride and groom decided to release a bunch of pigeons during the ceremony. It was a beautiful ceremony until all the pigeons started flying around pooping all over the place. I don't remember the marriage lasting very long. Story 19. When my brother married his wife, my sister and I were a bit taken aback that while she was getting ready, her dad got down on knee and put her garter on her leg. I had never seen that. Story 20. The length of a lot of the weddings I went to at a certain point in my life tended to be determined by how many musically talented siblings the couple had. This in itself was fine and made things predictable enough. But then there was the wedding that got delayed a bit. We don't know what happened. We didn't really know the bride that well. We're closer with the entire rest of her family than her. Best we could figure out was there was some minor issue with her dress, and the wedding wasn't off. It was just delayed for like an hour while things got fixed. In hindsight, it's also possible this person was having a panic attack, but her family wasn't admitting that, so we'll never know. The musically talented siblings get deployed a little earlier and harder than usual to terminate time for about an hour while things resolve. Again, this is normal enough until the groom, who most of us have never seen head or tail of before, If I recall right, he'd met the bride at Bible college in Florida, performs a few pieces on the trumpet about midway through this. He honestly wasn't bad either, but I went to about 15 weddings in that community, most of them for people with bigger egos, and no one else had a musical moment at their own wedding. Except that dude who I've never seen since because he and the bride went right back down south after the wedding and seemed to be doing well. I want to say up to 4 kids now. Story 21. At mine, my husband's cousin was flirting with every woman there, me included. Holding my hands while dancing and picking me up, I kept just floating away from him all night. Story 22. At the reception, the groom goes to take off the bride's garter. He disappears up her voluminous dress for about 45 seconds, then comes out with a fishing pole. He starts furiously reeling it in and eventually pulls out a pair of lacy panties. It was freaking amazing. Story 23. Considering my wedding experience consists of one in the family which was really normie and official, and one super medieval themed where nearly 80% of the people, including me, had some kind of medieval clothing, I'd say the entirety of that second wedding. Story 24. This might be kind of common, but everyone's saying it will never work as they walked down the aisle. Groom drunkenly yelled at bride at later after party. They are divorced, and she is now married to a woman. The other one was early reception groom doing a dance with mom and sister to Cats in the Cradle in tribute to dead father. Nice, but really brought the whole vibe down, haha. And later in the drunken hours, the groom mostly danced with his sister as bride sat in corner looking forlorn. Another common, one in Hawaii and one in Puerto Rico. Everyone was dressed up and sweating our asses off. It was torture. And the wedding parties desperately trying to pretend they weren't melting. Anyone doing tropical wedding, you have to make it casual. Man, so many. Another was sisters of the groom being poor to the bride BC. They didn't like her and think she was good enough for their brother. I get this happens. But usually it's talk cow behind their back. But at the wedding, that is some major bad person balls. They are still married and the family off. Wild. Story 25. Story 26. They had all guests seated for the ceremony but did their vows quietly to each other so no one could hear. So everyone was just sitting there in silence. Story 27. The grandfather of the bride got quite drunk, and his came out into the open as he called many guests slurs and questioned why they were there at his granddaughter's white wedding. Story 28. My cousin's wedding. A rat, maybe a very large mouse, was terminated on the dance floor by the cat the venue owned. Story 29. Bride sang to the groom. My heart will go on. The accompanying gestures and facial expressions were very dramatic and sentimental. She was out of tune the entire song, and it was a dry wedding, so we had to listen to it sober. Story 30. During the reception, the whole crew was dancing on the tables just going crazy. Someone found out that Tiny Tim was staying in the hotel, and they went to his room and convinced him to come to the party and sing his little song. Then, as we were all leaving, a gigantic brawl broke out in the parking lot. I'd categorize this whole experience as surreal. Story 31. I went to a boy-male marriage in London, distant cousin, but I was invited and intrigued. It was about 7 or 8 years ago. There were 2 aisles, and each lad went down one aisle with their mum, was well thought out TBF, and didn't feel any different to any other wedding. They were nice lads, and even though the family is old school, everyone had a great time. Never seen 2 aisles used like this before, though. Story 32. Everyone in the wedding party and many of the guests were in camouflage battle fatigues, I guess in case the commies attacked. Story 33. At the reception in a large hall, they put up a picture on 4 or 5 projector screens of a fetus wearing a photoshopped hockey jersey to announce they were expecting. We got to eat dinner while this thing stared back at us. That was after the hockey draft-style picking of the tables for the buffet line. Story 34. On the wedding of one of my oldest friends, I brought my pink plushy unicorn onesie, changed into in the middle of the party, and stormed the dance floor. She absolutely loved it, and it was the moment people started dancing and getting a bit out of their shell. She had asked me for this in kind of a joking manner a while before, but she never thought I might actually do it. Story 35. The bride and groom did their vows separately, wrote them out and read them in different rooms. Don't worry, they still got the photo op, but they were individuals of them reading, crying, etc. They got divorced after 6 months. Story 36. Not anything earth-shaking and probably not unique. Just because I'd never seen it before doesn't mean it never happened. But after the vows, while the soloist is doing her thing again, the 4 principals step over to the side of the altar and sign the paper. I'd never seen anyone do that on the altar table before, and it sent me down a sacred versus secular rabbit hole for a while. Story 37. I took kung fu classes for many years as an adult. By the time I got married, I was no longer a student, but I hired the lion dance team at the school to do a lion dance for the reception. It was awesome, and all the guests said it was the coolest thing they'd ever seen at a wedding. Story 38. In a high Episcopal wedding which went on forever, one of the kneeling female attendants passed out and fell over right next to the altar. Story 39. I was a hotel banquet server when I was in college. I didn't see it, thankfully, but there was a wedding where two guests decided to impersonate the wedding night couple in an alcove of the coffee shop, which was closed in the evenings. Apparently, neither of them looked in the other direction and saw that said alcove opened onto a very busy hallway. Story 40. The MIL, rightly, had a personal moment because Muriel is a psycho. We took her to a private room in the resort to try to convince her that Muriel wasn't a psycho. Muriel just has moments. She's fine. It's why we're all here. I still feel guilt because Muriel Sean is a horrible with bipolar disorder. We haven't spoken in 7 years. But trying to convince her mother-in-law she wasn't the raving lunatic she is was rather strange. Story 41. Instead of tossing rose petals down the aisle, they tossed chicken nuggets. Hands down the strangest thing I've seen. Story 42. We have religious freaks related to us in Michigan, and my cousin married her husband in Jesus. She's a bad person because she didn't appreciate the close relationship jokes from absolutely everyone. If you're weird, expect reply, haha. Also, there was a long speech about her responsibilities as a wife that was very old world, which, whatever, it's a ceremony. And then he said to the groom, and you will support her too. And that's it. Her list of rules was like 5 minutes long. Her mom didn't support her at all when she turned 18. So she got super religious and impulse married. They're miserable, and if she tried suggesting divorce, his family might posse up and murder her first LOL. Good choice, cause thumbs up, nice job. Story 43. First wedding, the groom turned and faced everyone and said, I do, instead of looking at the bride. Second wedding at the after party, a guy got up on a table full of beer and screamed, yeah! Then the table flipped, he fell on the beer, blood everywhere. He's taken to the hospital, then my father ran out after him, drunk as fudge, smaking into a large pillar, while the bride cried about her wedding being ruined. Third, my cousin, the bride, said a speech during the dinner and said great things about the new family she was now married into, and trash-talked our family, so half of us got up in the middle, took the gifts off her table and left. For reference, she was treated great by our family. She's very spoiled. Fourth one, for context, the ceremony was done in a backyard of the guy who got his marriage license for the bride and groom. It was a small wedding, just the bride, groom, the parents of the bride, the friend of the groom, and me. After the ceremony, we went inside the home for cake in the kitchen. There was a wall separating the kitchen and the living room. Unfortunately, the bride, groom, and I found when going to the living room, there were candy addicts passed out, or using what looked to be candy. We packed up our things and left. Guess it's good they didn't want tradition. Story 44. After the dinner, the entire wedding party simultaneously used a very long piece of floss to clean their teeth. Apparently, it was a thing from the groom's side. I'm related to the bride, thankfully.